So I suppose today what I want to talk about is a project I've been working on mainly internationally for the past 8 years, coming up to 8 years. And I've termed it doing the impossible, and how that started was back in 1998. I was working in an office in Melbourne. I was working for one of the world's largest corporate strategy firms, and we were working on projects literally all around the world. And I was getting bored. But while I was there, I sort of learnt this lesson, which I'll talk about a little bit later. To jump ahead quite quickly, I had a meeting in Perth back in 1998. I took leave. I travelled up the West Australian coast of Broome, hitchhiked up actually. The first ride was with a removal van. We picked up a house in Wongan Hills and unloaded that. And when I got to Broome, I decided that I'd move up there. I'd move to the Kimberley, do something completely different. Up until that point, I'd taken 20 rolls of film in my life, and we were shooting film back in those days. I moved up to Broome. 2004, I became a professional photographer, and becoming a photographer had never been on my horizon at all. I don't even think it had ever occurred to me that I might want to become a professional photographer before I moved to Broome. 2006, I was invited by one of my clients to go to Ghana and do a shoot for them in Ghana. And it was a 2-week shoot, and while I was there, I saw these Galamsey illegal gold miners, and they were mining by the roadside, literally in their hundreds. And this, like in this stuff, there's a whole heap of stuff that you see around the world that's tied up in this type of mining, and everyone's got a view. Anyone who knows anything about it has a view on it. You've got environmental degradation, for example, they're using mercury here, so that's running down into the rivers. You've got, in places, you've got slavery, you've got extremism, you've got organised crime, you've got child slavery, all of this kind of stuff. And another shot. So I put this video together a few months ago just that shows you a few pictures, and will give you a bit of a feel for what I'm doing, if we can get it going. There we go. Told you technology's not my strong point.
Very powerful.
So out of that 2006 trip to Africa, to Ghana, this project came about, and I started working on it in 2010. Since then, I've been working, and I work in some of the most remote, difficult and dangerous places on the planet. This is the part of my speech that I changed from the other night, but there's a whole heap of stuff that goes into doing, because you don't just waltz into downtown Kabul or other places and start shooting. It's a really good way to get killed. So my training now, it's, the photographical side is a part of it, but now I'm doing how to evade kidnap and suicide bombers. I'll give you a sort of little known fact. In Kabul, most suicide bombings happen on a Friday in the mornings and afternoons, so you don't go shopping on a Friday, you go shopping in the evenings. Hotel and room safety when you're on the road, for example, they say the safest rooms to stay in a hotel are usually between the 2nd and the 4th floor of the hotel, because if the hotel gets hit, you've got time to react. And some say that even within a floor, you should aim to stay halfway between the fire exit and the lift lobby. And you should always walk the fire exit when you go into a hotel as well. Dealing with kidnap, what happens if you go in the bag? They call when you get kidnapped going in the bag. So dealing with incarceration, to-do list for loved ones, which is what I put together as to how you might handle these things. Last year I did a 11-day meditation training, and the whole purpose of that was, a mate actually suggested after I came off survival walk in the Kimberley, he said, you should go and do this, and I said, why the hell would I want to do that? Because I've done meditation before and it's great, but in the context of where I'm at this stage of life, I didn't feel that it was going to help. And then I was reading a book that ex-military friend of mine suggested I read. It's called, by Rolly Richards, A Doctor's War. And he was talking about how he was incarcerated for long periods of time in really dark places during World War II. And straight away I thought, that's why I need to go and do this meditation training, because I go in the bag, it gives me some tools hopefully to deal with that. Escape and evasion training. If you get captured, how do you get away, and then how do you evade being recaptured as well? You know, so for one country I was going to, I had a curtain sheath to chuck over the top of me, because they say that when you're on the run, there's five things of escape and evasion: shape, silhouette, shine, spacing, and shadow. And so shape was something you need to change when you're in a barren landscape. Survival training, Arctic, desert, and tropical survival. How do you, if you're on the run, or if your car breaks down and you have to get back to civilization, how do you do that with minimal or no food? And how do you do that in an Arctic environment? How do you do it in a tropical environment? And how do you do it in a desert environment, for example? So before I went to Siberia in January, I did a lot of preparation in terms of how to light fires in the Arctic, because you've got permafrost. So if you light a fire and you're not and you don't do it right, the heat melts the ice, which then floods the fire and puts the fire out. So you put green logs underneath. Weapons training, becoming familiar with using long arms, sidearms, and then more recently sort of martial arts training. So last weekend we did a 14-hour course, Krav Maga, dealing with, you know, all sorts of scenarios, active shooters, all that kind of stuff. It's, you know, for some it's confronting, but it's rather than have your head in the sand, I'd rather deal with it. And I find it really, really interesting as well. So let's bring this forward. In 2015, I was sort of tossing up going to...
There's nothing on there, should there be something?
No, I just realised, thanks Cheryl, I thought I'll tell the story first and then bring the image in. In 2015 I was looking at going to Afghanistan, and I rang a mate. I rang a contact and said, what do you think? And he said, well, he'd been there 4 times, and twice in Kabul he'd had an AK held to his head by the Taliban. And he went on another occasion, that was sort of reasonably okay, and then the 4th occasion, before he was due to go, his fixer was assassinated by the Taliban a week before he was due to go. So I thought it's probably not doable. And he mentioned Pakistan. And Pakistan has this sort of mystery. Most people, because we're brought up listening to the media that it's a really difficult place and it's terrifying, a lot of terrorism and all of that sort of stuff. And straight away that's what came into my head. And I did a little bit of digging, and I found some gem miners up in the High Karakoram range in northern Pakistan, and these gem miners are some of the highest miners in the world. They're literally mining at 5,000 metres, or just short of 5,000 metres. So if you can picture the position I'm in, I'm sitting here in Perth, got a comfortable bed, friends close by, and this thing's floating around in my head about going to Pakistan. And I do some more reading, and I learn about 11 climbers that were killed on Nanga Parbat, the world's 9th highest mountain. And basically what had happened was these guys were looking to make an ascent. They were at base camp, and the Taliban had rolled up, come up the glacier at 1 o'clock in the morning, 45 kilometres they had to walk up the glacier. And they've proceeded to pull the climbers out of their tents at 1 in the morning, execute them, all bar one. One got away, there was a misfire. So that was going on in my head. I think, Jesus, you know. So you've got this, you can feel the fear when you think about what could go wrong. And so ordinarily you'd say it can't be done. That's too risky. But when I was working in Melbourne back in 1998, one of the greatest lessons of my life came sitting in that office. And that was, there was a solution to every problem, because we're working on all sorts of industries. We're working on financial services, we're working in oil and gas, we're working waste management, metals and light engineering, whatever else. And after a while you start to realise that each problem is really complex, but the process for solving those problems is the same. So I've always carried that lesson with me, that there's a solution to every problem, and I found it to be incredibly powerful. So I'm sitting there looking at Pakistan, and I decided to do a recce trip after talking to my mate Al, who Cheryl's met, in April of 2015. And that was an amazing trip of itself. It's 2 weeks, because I thought I'm just going to go in. I'd spoken to journalists that worked in the country, and I'd been given a few other contacts, and they all said, look, it was pretty good. And I fly in, and I've got a ticket booked and paid for from Islamabad to Skardu. And Skardu's in the northern part of Pakistan, right up near the border. It's 100 kilometres from K2, the world's second highest mountain, and it's right up near the border with India, China and Afghanistan, closer to India and China. So I get flown to Islamabad, go to my hotel that first night, and then go to the airport the next day, and the airlines cancelled my ticket. Didn't say why, they just felt like it was a good thing to do. So they said, come back tomorrow, we'll bang you on the plane tomorrow, and I knew what was going to happen. I knew that the weather would come in and the planes wouldn't be able to fly, because you're flying literally over the highest mountains in the world, or some of the highest mountains in the world. And so I'm working on my head, what's the backup plan? So the KKH, the Karakoram Highway, which is the world's highest paved road, it's got this sort of really dangerous reputation. And I spoke to about 10 different people, how safe is this road? 9 said, yeah, no, it'll be okay. And the 10th said, it's almost safe. And I'm thinking, what does that mean, you know? So I thought, all right, we'll do the KKH. And we find ourselves going through a place called Abbottabad. And I don't know why I remembered, but I said, isn't this where Osama bin Laden was killed? And my driver points straight down that street there. And we're right next to the biggest army base you've ever seen. It's a kilometre frontage onto the KKH. Anyway, we're supposed to do a 25-hour straight drive through without stopping, essentially, other than for fuel. I was absolutely murdered by this stage. You know, by about 8 or 10 hours I was murdered, because you potholes and you've got a 1,500 foot drop down the side, there's no road barriers, and you're literally driving with your feet in the passenger side of the car. So then we got put off the road at 10 o'clock at night by the police, and I thought it was because all the landslides were going on. It was raining, and there was big landslides, like huge big rocks half the size of houses coming down the hill, and they're hitting the road, you know. And it turned out not to be the landslides, it was a Taliban we got put off the road for. So the next day we take off, and we've got a police escort in front and a police escort behind. There's probably 5 armed police with AKs in the front vehicle, and about the same in the back. And then after half the day had passed, we then sort of down to just having an armed police officer in the back. So long and the short of it was, I had, there we go. So that was my bodyguard on the left for that trip, because the Pakistan government assigned guys like me a bodyguard. And then I came home, and I decided to do the bigger trip in August 2015. And what was, you know, the bit that I didn't mention at the start was these miners are working on the world's, literally the cliffs on the side of some of the world's biggest mountains. Where I ended up working was probably, I don't know, 50 k's as a crow flies from K2. And if I was to capture these miners working, it meant that I had to learn to rock climb. And I'm really had issues with heights over the years. So I made a few phone calls in Perth, and I ended up I was put onto a guy called Terry Hewitt and his son Jack. Terry's an ex Special Forces soldier, and just a great guy, and one of the most competent people that I've ever met. So Terry and Jack, over the course of a month or two, threw me over the side of cliffs a few times, and I I won't say I got used to it, but I learnt to deal with it better. And then I went to Pakistan, and the other challenge about Pakistan was that I knew there were these miners in the Karakoram, but I didn't know exactly where they were working. And when you, as you all know, when you're taking photographs, you're looking for a whole range of things. You're looking for aesthetics, you're looking for lots of people so that you can choose the people you want to work with, because some people are photogenic, some people aren't. You're looking for a whole range of things. So you've got this big massif, which is part of the Greater Himalaya, and I've got to find these gem miners in the right place. So we go off and we do a trip up into the mountains. A lot of time and negotiation went to getting into this place. We had to go through a military base. What was kind of interesting about that was on the way out, I'd become friends with one of the Pakistan Special Forces commandos, and he heard I was coming back out, so he invited me in for breakfast. And his breakfast was in a bit of a room, a bit like this, but probably twice as wide, and on that half of the room were all these, RPGs and bombs and all kinds of things. It was kind of surreal sitting there having breakfast, and you got all these, munitions with you as well. And so my first expedition this was my expedition team. I've got the porters, the Balti porters, and they're strong. They're just incredibly strong. I've got the chairman of the Gems Association. Now this guy here, back here, he's a legend. He was my cook. So you have a cook in these places because it's all about spreading the benefit. But he was an absolute classic. He was just like Manuel from Fawlty Towers. So you can see in this picture, everyone's facing the camera for the photo, and Manuel's looking at, back here's looking at something like, I don't know if it's a wrapping on a food voucher or something, whatever it is. He's just not facing the camera. But a great guy. We climbed from 2,500 metres down at the river, and we climbed to an altitude of about 4,700 metres over 3 days. And then I went straight up 70 metres up a 500 metre cliff. And there's a glacier just here on the left. It was really cool. I don't know how long it took to get up there, but the photo wasn't quite right. This was one of the miners up there. The photo wasn't quite right in their head, and they weren't as, they weren't quite what I was looking for in terms of photo aesthetics, and there weren't enough of them. So I think K2's probably off to his 90 degrees to his left. So I then came back, recalibrated, and went to another part of northern Pakistan, a place called the Hunza Valley, which is heading up close to the border with China. It's a couple of hours from there to China, or probably 3 hours, and it's very close to the border with Afghanistan as well. And part of when you're doing these shoots, you've really got to slot into the rhythm and feel of the place you're in, and that's what I love about my work. You get to become friends with these people, and you realise after a while people are all the same around the world. And where I was staying, the hotel I was staying at in Karimabad, had this cobblestone street. It was quite steep, and every day I'd go up and have cups of tea with my mate Nasir and Amir and all that. But there was this guy, and you could see the English influence in Pakistan because he had this. He sort of looked Pakistani, but then he looked English, and he had the English accent as well. And on one particular occasion, as I say, you get to know these people, you become part of the furniture. He said, "Oh, Mister, we have a problem. I said, "What's the problem?" He said, "Oh, baby, woman, pregnant, die. You need to come and help her." And I said, "Look," "you need to get her to hospital." And I said, "I'm not medically trained." I said, "You need to get her to hospital. There's a hospital down the road. I know it's down there because we went there today." "Oh, no, not good." Anyway, so I couldn't help him. I wasn't prepared to volunteer knowledge that I didn't have. Anyway, a day or two later I see him again, and I ask about this pregnant lady and the baby. I said, how is the lady?" He said, oh, no good. He said, I think she's died. I said, what the hell? I said, do you want me to have a look? Yeah, that would be great. And there was sort of a set of stairs leading down off this cobblestone street into a room, and the room had a padlock on the door. And I thought, I'm not going in that door because, I mean, I know seems like a nice guy, but I'm not prepared to take that risk of getting kidnapped. I said, you go and bring her up to me. He goes down, and what he emerges with, it still makes me laugh to this day, was a dead cat. And it was stiff as a board. Poor bugger. So we ended up putting together an expedition in Hunza, and we ventured up into the High Karakoram range again, a place called Chuma Bakor. It had never been photographed, this place. And we had a 1950s Jeep that took us up this really narrow mountain track, which I'll show you in a little while. And then we took a donkey train up into the high mountains. So here, for example, we've got the donkeys, we've got all the gear, and this is the glacier that's running down between the mountain at the back and where we were. It was just, and all night when we were sleeping there, the ice was crashing. It was just spectacular.
When you say they're mining there, Hugh, are they like chipping stuff off the mountain? Is that the mining?
They're doing, when I say conventional, they're drill holes.
Oh, okay.
Stick dynamite in there and.
Oh, okay, good. That's good when you're hanging off a mountain. Brilliant.
Yeah. So I was actually nearly killed in a blast because they would have maybe 100, 200 blasts a day where I was working, and you had them all over the mountain side, and most of the time they would warn there was a blast coming so you could take cover, and then when you had to take cover, like they tended to shelter on inside the entrances of all the mines, but you'd look up the entrance to the mine, you see this overhanging rock and you go, that's not a good place to be. So I preferred to shelter just outside the front, and I'd measured the sort of trajectory of I'd looked at the trajectory of the rock that was likely to come down, and I figured it was safer there than if the mine collapsed. And then so here's coming up in the donkeys up into the mountains. Half of that's camera gear. We've got a cook again. We've got a Safdie in the middle there. He was my high altitude porter. He'd summited Broad Peak, which is one of the 8,000 metre mountains in the world. Amazing guy. And then we get to this, and it's really kind of interesting because it's quite confronting. There were 600 guys, and you still had in the back of your mind what went on at Nanga Parbat, and you didn't know whether these guys were part of that same sort of crew. You've been told they hadn't, but you're right out on your own. You know, one of the miners. And this was the camp. So there was 100 of these stone huts with plastic over the roof, and then all these mountains over the back are 7,000 metre plus mountains. It's spectacular. And the first night we get there, my team wanted to mutiny because they wanted to camp a kilometre away from this camp. And I said, no, we're staying here in the camp because you've got to, for the work that I do, you've got to become part of them. You've got to show them that you're part of them. You eat like them, you live like them, you go to the toilet like they do. Yeah, it's an interesting concept when you think about our concept of dignity, and then you're in a place like this, and you know, your whole concept of what dignity means and is totally different. Yeah. So anyway, Safdar and Manzoor, they eventually agreed we'd stay with them. And then 10 o'clock that night, you can't sleep at altitude either, by the way. The altitude here was 45, 50 metres. Your lungs are heaving half the night, you've got dry mouth, and you can't sleep. And at 10 o'clock at night there's a torch on my tent, people talking in Urdu. And I thought the Taliban had arrived. And it was a petrifying fear. And I grabbed my pocket knife, not that that's going to do anything against an AK-47, but hey, you've got to try. And I lay there in fear for probably a couple of hours, absolutely extreme fear. And then those guys went away. And the next morning I resolved to go back, all those miners that I'd met the day before, that I would go and pick the most vocal guys, and then I would talk to them and make friends with them, and basically that's what I did. And within 5 minutes of doing that, I was being invited into their huts to have dinner and shapiri or whatever they call it. It's like they call it pizza, but it's like a pie almost. It's nice. And after that, just the world opened up at Cruellest Earth, and so I spent 2 weeks there. Basically, the guys brought the ore out of the mine, or the waste out of the mine, and the waste got tipped straight down the side of the mountain. So you had to be careful. There were no mines above you tipping waste when you're going past. And this track looks quite easy here, and it was, but in certain parts that track was only this wide, and it was loose rock, and it was that steep down the drop, probably 150, 200 metre drop straight down. And you carry camera gear and all of that. One of the challenges in that place also was the guys had probably gotten a little bit complacent, because they were, so there was supposed to be a 3-foot gap spacing between mines, but that spacing got down to 18 inches at times. So there were numerous times where I'd be standing at the face inside the mines, working on a photo or photos with particular people, and then just the mine next would just let rip a blast. And that's basically what happened when I nearly got killed, because there was no warning for the blast. And then all of a sudden I'm walking along with Safdar and Co behind me, and a bit of fly rock went past at 200 kilometres an hour straight past my beak. It probably wouldn't have been great if it collected for the rock at least anyway. You can see this mountain behind is Diran, 7,211 metres I think. This is a meat vendor, so he's bringing out goats to supply meat for the miners. Spectacular mountain, just stunning. The guys working on putting the explosives together for blasting. And then this was the blast guy that didn't ring the bell when Uncle H nearly got cleaned up. So, and that's Diran behind. So to give you an idea how big that mountain is, we're at 4,550 and that mountain behind 7,211. So there's 2.7 vertical kilometres height difference between us and the top bit. They reckon, I think someone said about 27 people at least had died trying to climb Diran. Because a big crevasse field going through the bottom. This was Mohammed. He was insistent that I go and photograph his mine. The only issue was we would have to climb up. Now to get round to that mine, we literally, at one stage, we're standing on a ledge this wide, and there's a 150, 200 metre drop straight down, and I said to my high altitude porter, Safdar, I said, mate, we need to rope up for this. Because you're sort of like this, you're just jelly legs and all of that kind of stuff. So he throws me a piece of rope, chucks it around my waist, and then just grabs the end. So it gave you zero confidence whatsoever. I think it's actually quite powerful. They call it short roping. But we get to here, and this is Mohammed inside his mine. He insisted that I see his mine. He was really, really proud about his mine. And to give you an idea how high up Mohammed is, and he mined above all the others because he figured it was too dangerous being down low with all the other mines. He said they'd sort of lost the plot a bit. To give you an idea how big his mine was, or high up. So this is him here.
Oh, wow.
So we came from down here and straight up.
Can I just, when you say the mines, who owns the mine? Is it his personal mine, or is
That's his personal mine, yeah.
Of the mine?
No, that's his personal mine. So that each of them, in each mine, there was seven owners of the mine. So there was, the cook even owned a stake in the mine. And so the benefits were spread, but they were just the most cracking guys. Mohammed used to be an ibex hunter. So that's how he came to learn about Cruellest Earth, because he used to roam these mountains hunting for ibex. You know, amazing stuff. He wanted me to find him an Australian wife, so if anyone sort of...
Looks like a nice place to live.
Did he want her to go there, or did he want
I'm sure that's up for negotiation.
I don't know anybody.
So on the way down, load up the donkey again. Got the camera gear and my Canon stuff and all the gears in the bag there. So my gear gets thrashed around. It's just a fact of where I work and life. And then we come to another video. So we get down to the drop-off point for the donkeys, and then we go to the video. So this is the trip out of where we left the donkeys. You're driving with your feet in the passenger side, hoping to brake.
Oh, another one.
What's the weather like there?
It's mountainous weather, so the mountains are unpredictable. Weather comes in at any time.
Because that is all these days, or the feeling days and tenses.
Yeah, so Pakistan was an incredibly complex trip. There was the perceived fear you had at the start, and then there was the sort of having to climb at really high altitude, and then there was, you know, all this stuff that if you sort of sat there and knew what was required at the start, you would have said you couldn't do it. But it come back to that lesson that I learned when I was in my office in Melbourne back in 1998, and when you realise there's a solution to every problem, it's amazingly powerful. So, you know, in the context of you guys here, how that translates into what you're doing with your photography, you can do anything you want. You just got to know that you can do anything you want and not let the doubt keep cutting into your mind. Oops, hang on. So yeah, so this is something that I'm really big on. And then the second thing is that forms a part of that anyway, is that once you know there's a solution to every problem, you've got to want it. So people sometimes say to me, you know, how do I make money from photography? I'm no good at marketing, all of that sort of stuff. If you don't really want it, you don't really want it. You might just think you want it, but often you know when you want something, and when you combine that with being able to, with knowing that anything's doable, it's amazing what can happen. And that leads me into this next story in the Congo in 2010. So we're jumping around a little bit to get that. Back in 2010, late 2010, I had a shoot in Little Congo, the Republic of Congo. And the client basically said the MD was going to fly out from Australia. He was going to meet me in the capital, Brazzaville, and they wanted me to go and join him in a Russian military helicopter to take pictures up in a really remote part of Little Congo. So it's all good, no problems. So I booked my tickets weeks in advance, all good, and then 2 days before, Air Nigeria. I'm not a big fan of Nigeria at the best of times. It's not just all about Nigerian scammers. But the airline rings you up and said, we bumped you from your flight, the connection's too tight. Didn't offer me any alternatives. And when I got the travel agent onto it, there were no alternatives. There were no other connecting flights. So I'm in Ghana, MD's flying all the way up from Australia to RV with me, and we've got a Russian military helicopter that's costing 10 or 20,000 US for the day. So I'm sitting there and I go, right, a solution to every problem, right? What is it? How do I do this? How do I do it? And I spent the first 24 hours, I was looking at taking a vehicle across 2 countries into Benin. So crossing into Togo and then crossing into Benin into the capital, Cotonou. But then I thought, border crossing in Africa is tricky and risky at the best of times. You can get held up, everything, all sorts of things can happen. So I decided that it probably wasn't going to be a sure bet. So now I'm 24 hours before I'm due to fly, or due to be there. And for some reason I remembered that there was a speedboat that went across from Kinshasa in the Democratic Republic of Congo into Republic of Congo. Don't ask me how I remembered it, because I'd heard it once in a passing conversation. It wasn't a key point. Someone had just said it, and for some reason it stayed filed in the brain. So I rang the client and I said, look, this is not a guarantee, but I'm going to fly to Kinshasa, and I want you to have someone meet me at the airport, because I'm flying into Kinshasa without a visa, and I'm going to be leaving Kinshasa without a visa, if I can even get in. So I booked a business class ticket from Ghana to Nairobi. They nearly didn't let me on in Nairobi, and I talked my way past that, and then I landed in Kinshasa. And the client had one of their people to negotiate for me, if you know what negotiation means. And I'm sitting at the airport in Kinshasa for 3 hours while the negotiations went on. Basically the DRC people trying to work out what the price of entry should be for me without a visa. And then after 3 hours I got taken by a minivan to a little room on the side of the Congo River, and the Congo River is just this spin-out river. It's the second biggest river in the world by discharge. It's got this history. And it's in the back of my mind, I'd like to traverse it from source to sea one day. But it's super dangerous. And just downstream of the crossing point from Kinshasa to Brazzaville are the biggest rapids in the world. Category 6 whitewater. Until 2011, they'd never been traversed. So you can imagine that a 4 kilometre wide river, and you've got Category 6, the biggest whitewater in the world. The river descends by 115 metres over 96 kilometres, which doesn't sound like a lot, but when you've got all that water coming down. And in 1985, a French team tried to traverse and they were never seen again. It was only in 2011 that a guy, Steve Fisher, a kayaker from South Africa, did it with a group of his people. But they had to have a helicopter in the air spotting their way through the rapids. So I'm sitting in this room on the Congo River, and then at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, after further negotiation, because the first negotiation was, how much do we let him in for? Because he hasn't got a visa. And then the second negotiation is, how much do we let him out for? Because he hasn't got a visa. So end up in this speedboat that was not very big, 7 people, and I got 70 kilos of my camera gear, and you got these big rapids just downstream. So I entered into Republic of Congo for the first time in a speedboat, which is kind of different. But that thing, that in all my travels around the world, that goes down as one of those things I pulled off, that there was no way I could have pulled that off. And it all comes back to what I said, there's a solution to every problem and when you want it. And when you combine those two things together, your brain works in really funny ways. Like, what caused me to think of a speedboat? What caused me to think of flying business class to Kinshasa without a visa? You don't do that stuff. But when you want something, when you know you can do something, like, it's just, the doubt is eliminated and you just focus 100% on the problem solving, and you end up with results and solutions you could never have even thought was possible. So you must want it. And this is taken from the Republic of Congo side. Looks like a fairly benign river there. And that's the Russian military helicopter. The other interesting part of that story was Josh, the videographer I brought from Australia. And while I was trying to get into the Republic of Congo, he was being detained in Dubai for 30 hours because Dubai Customs thought that his gyro stabiliser was a bomb. So when Africa goes pear-shaped, it really can go pear-shaped. The next component, I suppose, of doing these difficult places is stay the journey. And back in 2000 and 2012, I was been a professional photographer for 8 years, and I'd sort of reached a bit of a plateau in where I felt I was at in the photography, because when I started out, I aimed to take the best photographs that I could possibly take, and that usually meant beautiful photographs. But after a while, beautiful photographs meant nothing. It was, anyone can take a beautiful photograph, give them a camera for long enough, and everyone's going to take a beautiful photograph. I wanted to make a contribution to humanity. I wanted to feel that I'd done something, contributed something when I leave the earth, at whatever point that might be. So my approach to photography changed from aiming for taking the best photos that I could in the most beautiful light that I could, to taking important photographs. In my context, that was photographs that would be historically significant in years to come. So I was working on a book at that stage, still am, on the Pilbara, and I wanted to photograph iconic places that would be subject to rapid change and significant change in the years to come. Usually up in the Pilbara, that was in the context of mining. So I headed up to a place called the Governor, which is 120 kilometres north of Newman, and I bunkered down. I figured, okay, I'll be here for as long as it takes to get this particular photo. And there's a big difference between chasing the light, which I'm pretty sure everyone in this room does, and which I used to do, to picking a subject and waiting for the light to come to you. It's a really, really big difference. And we all think that chasing the light is more efficient and we produce a lot more photos. But when you wait for the light to come to you, the work is harder, but the rewards are amazing. And what happens is different things emerge during your wait that you would never think of sitting there and waiting for. So this was my camp. That's not my camp. Up high up on the range, that's an old exploration track. And that was the landscape I looked at pretty much every day. Nothing spectacular. And during that time there, it was like every day was over 40 degrees. You get the occasional storm come in, but usually what had happened is when the storm come in, it'd usually be as part of a cyclonic system from up north or a tropical low, and it'd all be cloudy, and so you didn't get the sun coming out, and it wasn't really that spectacular. So I just waited and waited. I had a piano that I would practice as well, hooked up to the car battery. And this place here is kind of good because you'd sit on the hill overnight on your own. It sounds crazy, but and you usually look out that way where the car's facing at night. And I had a lightning trigger for taking photos of lightning. They're the best thing ever. You just sit in your chair, you've got a beer in your hand, and cha-chink, cha-chink, cha-chink. The lightning trigger's just going off. And the lightning there wasn't so spectacular, but that was just not because of location. And then on about day 15 or 16, I decided, I gave myself about another week. I said, if the weather doesn't come, I'm going to have to go away and come back next year, because the weather was changing from a summer pattern to a dry season pattern. And so the weather was going. I thought, all right, I'll wait another 5 or 6 days or whatever. Anyway, day 17, there was a storm, and that storm it came in from the west, which is that way, and it didn't look much. It looked fairly nondescript, but I remember that a really good friend of mine, Meg Timewell in Whitnam, she's in her 70s now, she's just a cracking old lady, and she said to me, opportunity knocks but once, and I've always remembered that ever since 2006. The day she said it, we'd been talking about this rare wildflower in the Pilbara and Ashburton P, the white Ashburton P. So I drove 600 kilometres to go and photograph this white Ashburton P. And one of the things we remember, one of the things about life is we don't remember how hard the work was or how easy it was. We remember, did we do the business? And when I look back on that thing back in 2006 and many other times as well, I don't remember the 600 kilometre drive. I just got that image. And that's something I suppose that I carry everywhere in my shooting. So I went up onto the track, followed round and went up the side of that bundi on the So you got the face down the left hand side. On the right over the back there's a track that goes around, and I went and sat up on that track and just waited, set 2 tripods up, one for film, one for digital. And then it rained. Then the rain stopped. And day 17, and then this came out. And that was like 45-minute rainbow. It was just amazing. I just bang, 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 bang. This is on film. This is the governor over here. This is my subject that I've come for. And then, you know, again, put yourself in position so when the opportunity comes, you know, you don't remember the ones you got, you remember the ones you missed. So I waited till sundown, 5 minutes before sundown, bang. And people were talking about that particular sunset all over the Pilbara. Pink rain. No Photoshop, shot on film. Just stunningly, stunningly beautiful. It was like vindication.
17 days in the making, that's epic.
A bit crazy too, sure.
And no Photoshop, so yeah, very impressive.
Yeah, just, you know.
Most of your work you do pretty much straight out of the camera, though, don't you? You do a lot of editing.
Yeah. Yeah, that was just one of the special experiences I've had. So I suppose the key message there is stay the course. Yeah. Not so much in that shoot, but then the following summer I actually waited 77 days for 4 photos over 2 summers. And you question what you're doing out there. Is this a good use of my time? This is costing a lot of money. I could be doing something else. But for me in photography, I aim to. I don't want to take 1,000 good or 100 great photos in a year. I want to take 10 amazing photos in a year, because that's how you separate yourself out from what everyone else is doing. And it's like when I was at uni, I used to say to people, you've got to separate yourself out from the pack. And for me, that's about taking 10 unbelievable, incredible photos every year rather than 100 or 1,000 good ones, because the 100 or 1,000 good ones get lost with a billion other good ones that get taken out there. So again, so staying the course about, you don't remember the hardship, you remember did you do the business. And then this thing is a really powerful thing as well, and this is what enabled me to work in Bolivia. Very briefly, I'd been working in Guinea, Ebola flared up, I had to sit out a 3-week quarantine period, so I, rather than sit it out in Africa twiddling my thumbs, I jumped on a plane to Bolivia in the space of literally, I was within 96 hours of being told I had to sit out this quarantine. I was on a plane to Bolivia. And a place called Cerro Rico, the mountain that eats men. Cerro Rico has 2 monikers. One is the mountain that eats men, because they estimate between 4 and 8 million people have died on this mountain since 1545, since mining began. The other is the rich mountain, because in its day, back in the late 16th century, they were pulling silver ore out of there at 20%. So you think about a 10 kilo bit of rock and 2 kilos of that solid silver. It's incredible. So I get to Cerro Rico, and Cerro Rico is just this, it was this total spin out. Like everywhere you went, there was a smell of death. And I remember talking to a mate of mine who was one of the best photographers National Geographic's ever had. And Kerry we're talking about story ideas, and he was saying, because I kept talking about this blackness, and he said to me, why, wouldn't it be great if you could shoot the blackness? And I sort of went away and I had thought, okay, and the thing for me was it was about the smell of death. How do you photograph the smell of death? And that's what I focused doing with the shoot, because while I was there, 7 people a month were still dying. The miners, and the mountain's 4,800 metres high. No, actually it's 4,832 metres high. And then, because there's been so much mining going on, it's now 4,792 metres high. So it's been caving in on itself. I'll show you a picture in a minute. And the miners, to go in there, they all chewed coca leaf. Coca leaf's the raw material from which cocaine's derived. Bolivia is one of the few, if the only country in the world where you can legally buy coca leaf and chew it and do whatever you like. The miners chewed the coca leaf. They believe that combated fatigue, helped them get over the lack of oxygen, because you're literally one of the highest city in the world, and the brutalness of the work. And it was brutal. As I said, you know, this is Potency Cemetery. They've got them stacked on top of one another over the side. This is Spanish, but roughly translated it says, here lies the men who gave their lungs in the great mine shafts for the betterment of mankind. This is their reality. And here's the summit caved in, and they've tried to stabilise it with cement. But one day, and these are someone else's words, not mine, there's going to be 1,000 people die in a collapse on that mountain. I estimated there were 7 ways you could die on the mountain. One was an incomplete blast. So basically what happens, you drill your holes, you put your dynamite. You could buy your dynamite down at the local miners market. That was pretty cool. And I bought some dynamite down there. You give them to the miners and helped sort of become friends with them. But often what happened was, sometimes what happened was, if they didn't count their blasts, say they put 10 sticks in the wall in the face, and they didn't count their blasts, and only 9 sticks went off, and they go back and they start drilling again. And at least one person died that way while I was there. Blasting was an amazing thing. It's just like this high intensity thing. So they'd light the fuse, and then they'd run like hell. And then I'd run like hell. Silicosis was a major killer of the miners, and that's probably the biggest killer of all of them. The biggest risk was for the biggest exposure was for these drillers, because the other thing that happened when they broke into the face, the initial breaking of the face released this radioactive gas, radon gas, and when and that created crystals in your lungs. So you would get this happening to the lungs, and this is a deceased miner. So he's working average of 4,500 metres, so about half the oxygen you get at sea level, and he's operating on about 20% of his lung capacity. So his right lung's on that side's completely gone, and then you've got all these nodules on his left, that lung's virtually gone as well, and that's why he died. It was just crazy stuff. The other thing in the mine was the wagons, and basically they pushed these wagons through the mine. These wagons weighed between 1.5 and 2.5 tonnes. That probably weighed about 2.5 tonnes. You've got 2 guys pushing, and you've got these steel rails most of the time. When the steel had become too old, because they didn't have the money to replace the steel, they were putting down planks 4x2. So you have steel and hitting planks, and quite often you're getting derailments and all this sort of stuff. So, and then the average height of the main passageway in the mine was between here, about there, and about here. And they were this wide, just wide enough for the ore cars. So when you're moving through the mine, miners, myself, whoever, you had to time your run between alcoves about 50 metres apart. And if you got it wrong, you got crushed. And carrying gear and all of that sort of stuff and moving, and it's total blackness, and you've got a guy when the loaders, when you got the loaders coming out and the empties coming in, the empties had to give way to the loaders. So the guys with the empties, and the empties weighed 180 kilos each, just empty. they'd throw them off the track into one of these alcoves, and the noise was just deafening, and you literally had to cover your ears. And then they loaded to go past it, just bang it on, and they race it through again. And these loaders would come through 10, 15 k's an hour. It was just amazing. A guy lost both his legs just before I got there, crushed, because he threw his shoulder into the wagon to stop it derailing, and it's come off and the wheels are sliced through his legs.
Big survival.
Yeah. Yeah. Obviously not as mobile as he once was. The other thing about the mine was LTO. Each of the miners worshipped LTO. LTO was the devil. So outside the mine they worshipped God. Inside the mine they worshipped LTO, and LTO determined in their mind how the quality of the ore bodies that they found, and LTO determined whether they lived or died. Every mine, there was about 120, 140, well 140, every mine had an effigy of LTO. And they all used to bring him offerings of cigarettes and tobacco and coca leaf and confetti and alcohol. And they drink with LTO generally on a Friday. One of the highlights inside those mines was drinking with LTO, because the alcohol was 96% proof. So we're sitting in this particular case, we're knocking it all back with LTO. He's up the end there. He didn't say much LTO. And where I am, there's this big bit of overhanging rock, and it's super dangerous, and you're drinking 96% proof, and the world is just, there couldn't be a better place.
You've had your cocaine leaf.
So that was LTO. But for when I first got there, the conditions in Cerro Rico, Potosi were horrendously difficult, because you've got the altitude, you've got these dangers inside the mountain, and then you had difficulty finding a translator. Like Potosi was the hardest place I've ever come across to find someone to do my translation. But then you had the technical photography challenges inside the mine, and the photographic environment was horrendously difficult. Yeah, I mucked around with flash for the first few days. This is one of the miners. I actually pointed to him one stage. I said, what about that? I said, it's incredibly dangerous. He said, it's okay, LTO will keep us safe. Up here I shot with flash. I don't mind this shot. This is, after coming out of the mines, you're just covered in garbage. But the shooting conditions were just horrendous, and I remember spending 5 or 6 hours one day just making a grid for my flash. And I made it out of straws and foam and super glue. It took 5 or 6 hours just to help me with the direction, because you're working in shafts that are generally not much wider than this, and sometimes they're not much higher than this. So you don't want light spill on the mine walls. And Carlos up the back had helped me with some stuff over the journey as well. And but in this place, none of that worked. Unless, because you had, and the type of photos that I wanted to take in this particular environment were natural. I wanted people moving. I didn't want light spill. I wanted to show the blackness. I wanted to show the smell of death in this particular place. And where are we? We seem to have... So it was just a horrendously difficult environment. And my translator / fixer, my first one, Helen, and she worked with me on and off through the shoot, told me that she'd come upon she'd worked for a photographer a few years ago that had done a book on underground mining photography. And I was a bit, what's the word? I wasn't too fazed, because I'd been looking for decent mining photos around the world for years, and I'd never seen any. particularly in the underground environment. So I said, yeah, look, that'd be great to see, but I just filed it and kept on searching. She brings this book along, and it was the most amazing book of underground mining photography that I've ever seen. It was unbelievable. I thought, I've never heard of this guy. I've got to speak to this guy. Maybe he'll share some of his secrets, but then I'll understand if he doesn't, because these are hard-won secrets. So I sent him an email. I tracked his email down, and I banged him an email. And he said, look, why don't we hook up Saturday morning? We'll talk through 4 photographs from the book, and I'll tell you how I did them. So Saturday morning rolls round. We get on the Skype. He's in Switzerland, and I'm in Potosi. These are all remote places. And he was a lovely guy, amazing guy. He's in his late 60s, I'm guessing, early 70s. And he had no hesitation sharing all of what he knew. He said, you need to go and get this, you need to go and get this, and you need to go and get that. And all I knew was how, this guy's good, but how am I going to be as good as him? So we talked a few more times. I got out there, I tracked down the gear that he needed. Not easy. Potosí's it's a remote place, or it's remote-ish. And then I got stuck in and started shooting, and to this day the images from that shoot are probably among the best that I've ever taken. And I could show you guys those images and you probably wouldn't say they're among my best, but from a technical point of view they stand head and shoulders above most of what I've done. So yeah, it was an amazing experience. And then at the end I sent him an email. I didn't hear back. And he wrote back, he said, look, I'm sorry I haven't been in touch. He said, my health hasn't been good, I've been getting chemo. And then shortly after I got home, he died. And I wonder in my own mind whether it's being in these mines for 17 years that ultimately killed him. But he was one of the best photographers I've ever come across. I mean, what he did over 17 years in Bolivia is just incredible. And what a life, what an amazing life as well. All the experiences that he had. Just unbelievable. There's one other component to what I'll talk about today, and that's none of this happens. You can't get out and do amazing things or really, really difficult things unless you get started. And human beings, we're all like sharks. We sit there and we think a lot, but ultimately the momentum comes when we get out there and we start doing. And none of this project would have come about if I hadn't have jumped on a plane to Burkina Faso in late 2010 and gotten started. So if you guys have got that project there, that thing you really want to do, just start it. Don't think about it too much. Don't think about finishing, just start it and just keep chipping away, and before you know it, the years tick by and all of a sudden you're near the end. It's really, really powerful. So the title of the talk is Doing the Impossible. There's a solution to every problem, know it. You've got to want it, stay the course. Complex tasks such as that I did in Bolivia and Potosi with all those challenges, they're just ultimately an amalgamation of lots of little tasks, and if we do the little tasks well, the complex tend to take care of themselves, and then it's about getting started. And we can all do anything that we want. It's just a matter of getting out there and doing it. And you guys, in the context of photography, if you don't think you can do something, you can do it. Just start. So I've got a thing here. I'm going to be doing some webinars over the next while. And if you want to get the first one free, you feel free to put your name down on the thing on this table that I've got here. The webinars are going to be covering, how to use your camera better, travel photography, how to save money on excess luggage in airports, or how to negotiate your way around airports as a photographer, travel security, saving money on the road. There's heaps of stuff you can do there. Landscape photography, those who work in the Kimberley and Pilbara, how you can take better landscape photos, go by going there at the right times of year rather than, don't go in September, October, November generally, for example. March is generally not so good either. It's generally in those dry season or wet season. Aerial photography, and then book publishing. I mean, there's probably some of you in here that are at some stage are interested in doing books, I'm going to be sharing some of my secrets in doing that. And then my social channels, Facebook, Instagram and email for those that are interested. So I really want to thank you for coming along. Hopefully there's been something in what I've spoken about today, and might trigger some, you know, things that you've got. But yeah, thanks very much for coming along. Much appreciated.
In your photos, it's all about men, and you've only spoken of one woman.
Yes.
Was there actually women present in anywhere of
Yep.
these?
So there's an estimated 30 million men, women and children working in mines around the world. So I photographed quite a lot of women working over the years. They didn't feature today in the story just because it didn't fit so much with the message that I was trying to get across. But yes, there's, you know, Burkina Faso is a classic example of where there's lots and lots of women doing it. Guinea's another example as well. These places, everyone's in there. Yeah.
In these places like Pakistan, with all these sort of officialdom, do you find you're doing a lot of bribing?
I don't bribe.
Well, you said you did.
No, I don't. I didn't. That was my client sorting all of that out, and I'm not even saying they bribed either, you know. But I won't bribe. I'll give you an example. Cameroon, last September, we get pulled over in a gendarme sting in the back blocks of Cameroon. And basically they're pinging people speeding. Yeah, we were speeding, all that sort of stuff. They see me, and so the price goes up. I told the driver, we're not paying, we're paying the same as everyone else. So I'm sitting in the car for half an hour, nothing happens. I'm a bit tired of sitting in the car, so I get out, what's going on? So what I did is I went up and I sat right up in front of this gendarme commander. He's literally sitting under this huge big African mahogany. He's counting his money, like this. And he said, why don't you just pay? So I wasn't driving. You know, I haven't done anything wrong. And then one of the guys comes, I said, by the way, can I see your speed gun? He goes, yes, we can show you the speed gun. We can show you your number plate. We can show you the colour of your car. We can tell you the time. We can tell you what speed you were doing. And he's got this big smile on his face. 5 minutes later, he comes back with a speed gun. I said, look, that's all great. That's not actually our car. So he gives me the high five. He goes away. He comes back, here's your car. I said, okay, no problems. He said, come with me to the village. I bring you my sister. I said, no, look, it's okay. But I said to the gendarme commander, I said, I want a receipt. And all of a sudden the price goes from 10,000 to 25,000. And he said, yeah, we give you a receipt. You can take it to the courthouse. And my driver's absolutely crapping himself because he thinks he's going to jail and all of this kind of stuff. And I said to the gendarme commander, I said, sir, I said, look, I have a bit of a problem. Where I come from, it's illegal to pay bribes. And he said, if I get caught paying bribes, I can end up in jail in a lot of trouble. And I said, if that happens to me, it will not be good for you. And he said, no, you get receipt, it will all be above board. And I said, no problem. And then, literally 3 minutes later, I said, and what about all these other people? Are they getting receipts? How much are they paying? And he started to laugh. And then 3 minutes later, we're free to leave, pay the same as everyone else. I don't pay bribes, full stop.
So
the only time
what did you pay? You paid a fine?
We paid a fine of 10,000.
Right.
The only time I've ever paid something was in the Democratic Republic of Congo. The little bugger was watching me because there was an airport. The airport was closed. We got there too early. And the bugger was a security guard. He was watching me. I needed to go to the toilet, so I went behind a tree. And he comes up straight after I finished and he goes, so it was 1,000 CFA. You know, it was, I don't know what that was at the time, but yeah, I don't pay bribes speeding, and I'll outweigh the officials every single time. Every single time.
Well, my experience in the Congo was we got nailed in a sort of situation like you're in. And they really, I mean, they coerced it because they gave the guy, the local guy, who I was with, such a hard time. But in the end, it was just...
That's what they do.
Leave them alone.
Every time. It's
Yeah.
they do that, but it's a game, you see. So for example...
So
like,
you just leave him there?
no, I sit there and wait with him. We were there for an hour and a half. It's 5 o'clock in the afternoon because they get you at 5 in the afternoon because they know everyone's in a hurry as well. And I said, look, we'll sleep in the dust if we have to. And a mate of mine in Cameroon, one of the things he got caught in, which was good too, was a fallen tree across the road. And that's a beauty. So we will, if you give us some money, we will cut a way around this tree for you. So he pays the money, only to find that there's another fallen tree just behind it and they have to do the same thing again. It's a game. Most of the time it's a game. But you've got to have your senses working, you've got to be tuned to what's going on around you. Is this more than a game? Is there something more sinister at play? I carry a monocular with me so I can see forward at checkpoints 500 metres ahead because I want to know that there's no baddies. You know, there's not a fake checkpoint, that there's no baddies poking around. Any other questions? Cool. Well, thank you very much for coming along, and great. Have a great day. Thank you.
Thank you.